Fox News Alert, and back now to our breaking news as we get the first details of the president's major announcement on gun control tomorrow. And it appears now that he is going to be joined by some special guests that we had not heard about until about 8 minutes ago. Here's Jay Carney speaking about it moments ago.
I can tell you that tomorrow, the president and vice president will hold an event here at the White House to unveil a package of concrete proposals to reduce gun violence and prevent future tragedies like the one in Newtown, Connecticut. They will be joined by children from around the country who wrote the president letters in the wake of that tragedy, expressing their concerns about gun violence and school safety.
So is that appropriate? Joining me now, Leslie Marshall, a syndicated radio talk show host and a Fox News contributor, and Chris Plante, who is host of the Chris Plante Show. That is the first we have heard of that he's going to have children there as he makes a push on, for better or for worse, what is now a very controversial issue on which the American public is very deeply divided. Your thoughts on it, Chris?
Well, unfortunately, this has become de rigueur in American politics, but it's cynical, it is shameless. It is the use of children as props to advance an agenda that existed long before the Sandy Hook tragedy. They'll be stacked according to skin color and ethnicity to frame the president's face, because it's essentially part of the propaganda package as they present their bill of goods that will not solve the problem that we're attempting to solve. Other than that, I think it's a great idea.
Leslie, these children wrote to the president, the White House says, so obviously their parents gave them the okay on this and sort of let them go down that stream. So that's sort of one issue. But can you speak to the second issue, which is for every child that stands up there, there's going to be a child sitting at home with his parents or her parents elsewhere in the country, and they have their families have a different political view. And the use of children to try to guilt the opposition, I'm not sure how to phrase it, into acceding to the president's wishes. I don't know. Your thoughts?
I don't think he's trying to guilt anybody. I think he's making a very strong point. And the reason we were all shaken even more so by the Newtown massacre is because 20 of the victims were children. He as a parent, I'm sure, as well as a president, was probably very touched by these children's letters. And Megan, as you rightly pointed out, their parents not only allowed them to write them, but are allowing them, and they're standing by them to be with the president. I don't think this is going to sway anyone's mind on an issue that is very divisive, very emotionally charged, and it's certainly not going to sway any politicians with their vote. I understand some people might say it's sensationalistic, but if we look back, presidents left and right have used, when either proposing legislation or certainly when signing into law, groups, and sometimes they involve children, whether it be the Americans with Disabilities Act, Megan's Law, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, programs that affect veterans. And I think part of that is just to show that these are the people that push it.
I mean, everybody remembers the picture of President Obama signing the health care law with that beautiful little boy standing next to him. Everybody remembers that picture, I think. But when you're pushing for it, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it sounds the message is, 20 children were killed and more children will die if we don't do, this is the picture I reference on the healthcare, if we don't do what I want us to do. But, to telegraph in some way to the other side, and you tell me, Chris, whether this is what he's doing, but that if you don't agree with me, children like this are going to die. What if a Republican president came out pushing an anti-abortion bill and had a bunch of children standing behind him and said, it's children like these you're killing? It's just, using children just raises the emotional hackles.
Yeah, surrounded by infants, by preemies, when speaking up against abortion. This is just how cynical things have gotten in this town, quite honestly. It's purely for the imagery. The imagery, they recognize, is probably more important than what's in the legislation. They have an agenda. We know that the Washington Post reported last Friday that the Obama administration had the Justice Department in 2011 draw up a wish list for gun control, which I assume we're going to see that rolled out, or some version of that rolled out tomorrow by the president. This was a pre-existing list of demands by the Democrats, by the Obama administration, that they kept under wraps, according to the Washington Post, through the election cycle. And now they're trotting it out. And of course, they're going to surround themselves with children. And the problem that I have is not just with the cynicism and the propagandistic value of the imagery that they're conjuring up here, but the fact that they're going to present the American people with a series of proposals that will trample the Second Amendment, as they desire to do, but that it won't solve the problem that we're looking to solve. Well, they oppose
I know. Well, that's a different
rational...
issue. That is a different issue about, whether the proposals are going to solve it or not. I mean, I want to stick to the use of the children for now. On the other hand, Leslie, Newtown was a month and a day ago, and already it does seem to be losing some of its effect. I mean, that's not well phrased, but I'm just saying, like, the emotion that we all felt right after Newtown, it does seem to be waning. I mean, and that's the human experience. That's good for people because they need to move on. They can't function in that kind of grief. And so maybe the White House is trying to remind people that 20 babies were killed. They were killed. Little 5- and 6-year-old, 6- and 7-year-olds were killed. And there will be more if we don't do something. Now, it may not have to be gun control,
Absolutely.
but something needs to change.
Yeah, absolutely. The fact that we can even say, in the latest massacre in America, ... And I would bet, most of us know, unfortunately, there will be another one. Chris, I know you think this is just about politics, but for some of us, like myself on the left, it is not about stripping Second Amendment rights. It is about making a nation safer. Who are we making the nation safer for? Children. And those children are an example of that are standing alongside the president. Now, I'm not going to break out into Whitney Houston singing, "I believe the children are our future," but they are our future, which we as a nation, regardless of our politics, are trying to make safer for them, are trying for us as parents to have the confidence when we drop them off at school that we're picking them up in our car and not in body bags.
I mean, what of it, Chris? Would you feel differently if President Obama came out tomorrow and said, because he's also looking at mental health and he's looking at video games, and came out and said, with the children behind him, we need to bolster the mental health system. We need to close the loopholes there so that people don't keep falling through the cracks. We need to take a harder look at video game access by young, vulnerable children and parents who let them watch it or don't pay attention to their children. That's my main agenda. Oh, and by the way, we need to look at, some more reasonable gun control measures.
Well, again, you're absolutely right. You make a very important point, I think, and that is that there are cultural factors that most of us would acknowledge, accept, also contribute to the state of affairs in the United States when it comes to young people and their willingness to kill a whole bunch of people. Where does that come from? They see in Hollywood movies 18,000 people or something murdered by the time they're 18 years old. We treat human life in a very trivial fashion in a whole panoply of ways that we can't go into here. But I don't see the president pushing back against Hollywood or the video game makers, the contributors in many cases out of Hollywood, and all of the other factors that that contribute to this. Obviously it's a horrible and an intractable problem, but banning 100 guns out of 1,000 doesn't solve your problem for you. And one of the big problems I have is that this, the macro cynicism of it all in proposing what they had wanted to propose before Sandy Hook and getting it through essentially on the backs of the tragedy or on the back of the tragedy, and then using children as props to back up their essentially phony argument that this is going to reduce the likelihood that something like this is going to happen again in the future.
I think you got to be very careful when you introduce children into any sphere of politics. I'm not saying it should never be done, but don't you think? I'm just very careful when you talk about little kids. All right, thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Megan.